Hello students, welcome to today's session on database management system. The topic of the session is data models. At the end of the session, you will be able to summarize the concept of various data models of a database system. Let us discuss deeply what is meant by a data model. So every database will have an underlying structure which is called as data model. So the structure of a database is the data model, and the proper definition of a data model is a collection of conceptual tools for describing data, data relationship, data semantics, and the consistency constraints. We know that a database is a collection of interrelated data. So we have a set of tools that can best describe the data, what is the relationship between the data that exists in the database and the semantics of the data, and also the constraints which are used to satisfy the consistency in the database. All these put together we call it as data model. And a data model provides a way to describe the design of a database at the physical, logical, and the view levels. We already discussed what are the various levels of a database, and this data model provides a way to describe the design of the database at all these levels. We have four different categories of data models, and they are relational model, entity relationship model, object-based data model, and semi-structured data model. Let us see what is meant by a relational model. This relational model is best used in everywhere in the today's scenario, and it uses a collection of tables to represent both the data and the relationship among the data. So this relational model relates the data which is stored in the database, and the relational model is made up of tables, and we have the keys and everything to establish the relationship between the data. Each table has multiple columns, and each column has a unique name. So we have tables, and table contain columns, and each column has a unique name. And the tables are also called as relations in a relational model. And this relational model is the best example of record based model, because each of these relations are called as records. The record based models are named so because the database is structured in fixed format records of several types. So it is called as record based models. Each table contains records of a particular type. For example, a student table will contain the records of all the students. Each record type defines a fixed number of fields or attributes. In case of student table, the student ID, roll number, name, age, etc. forms the attributes of that particular record. The columns of the table corresponds to the attributes of the record type. So we have each one of the attribute which is represented as columns in the table. The relational data model is the widely used data model, and vast majority of the current database systems are based on this relational model. The next is the entity relationship model, which is popularly called as ER data model. So the entity relationship model uses a collection of basic objects which are called as entities. The objects are called as entities, and we have relationships among these objects. So the ER model is represented with the help of entities and the relationship among these entities. An entity is a thing or an object in the real world that is distinguishable from other object. So this is the definition for entity, which is a thing or object which is distinguished from other objects. The ER model is widely used in database design. For designing the databases, we first go for this ER model. The next type of data model is object based model, and the object-oriented programming that we recently or more familiar with has led to the development of object-oriented data model. This is seen as an extension of the data model, ER model, with notations of encapsulation, methods, functions, and object identity. Whatever the things that are used in object-oriented programming are extended with the ER model. So we know that ER model is used for designing the databases, and we have these notions of encapsulation, methods, functions, etc., which are used in object-oriented programming that are combined with the ER model. So this object-based model combines the features of object-oriented data model and the relational data model. The next type of data model is a semi-structured data model. This model permits the specification of data where individual data items of the same type may have different set of attributes. So this is not a properly structured data model. We have this model which allows us to use the data items of same type, but they may have different set of attributes. We discussed that in case of relational model, we have a record that will store all the records of a particular entity. So they all may have a same set of attributes, but in case of the semi-structured model, the same entity type may have different set of attributes. This is in contrast to the data models mentioned earlier, where every data item of a particular type may have the same set of attributes. This is what I have mentioned as an example for relational data model. And the extensible markup language XML is widely used to represent this semi-structured data model. We have also some other data models apart from the four models which we have discussed. Historically, the network data model and the hierarchical data model preceded the relational data model. So we had two other models like network model and the hierarchy model before the relational data model, and these models were tied closely to the underlying implementation, and hence they complicated the task of modeling data. So whenever you are going for any model, that should not depend on the implementation. So this means that when you want to change anything in the implementation, then you have to change the model also. So in case of these things, you should have a independence between the model and the implementation. So the network model and hierarchical model, since they were closely related to the implementation, they were not used recently. That is, it is used rarely in the old database code, which is still used in some places. So they are used little now. Whichever is used in older databases, that is retained now, but they are not used in the newer implementations. Summary: this is a simple topic which has discussed about the data models of a database. So this data model is the one which describes the structure of a model and database, and we have some tools which can be used to describe the data, the relationship between the data and the semantics of the data, and we also can explain what is the constraints that are used in the database. And we have four different popular data models. The first one is relational model based on tables and records. ER model, which is especially used for database design. Object based data model, which focuses on the object oriented programming part. And semi structured data model, which is used with XML. So this is the textbook which I have referred, Database System Concepts, 6th edition. Thank you.